The sun hung high in the sky, casting a golden glow over the sleek rows of luxury cars parked outside the upscale dealership. The polished exteriors gleamed under the light, a testament to the exclusivity of the establishment. Inside, the showroom buzzed with the quiet hum of activity. Salespeople in crisp suits chatted with well-dressed clients, their laughter echoing faintly against the marble floors. It was a world of opulence, where appearances mattered and first impressions were everything. Marcus Johnson stepped through the glass doors, his presence immediately contrasting with the polished atmosphere. Dressed in a simple hoodie jeans and well-worn sneakers, he looked like he had wandered into the wrong place. His attire was deliberate. He wanted to see how the dealership operated when no one was putting on a show for the boss. After all, he had just finalized the purchase of the business the day before, and today was his first unofficial visit as the new owner. He walked slowly through the showroom, his sharp eyes taking in every detail, the way the sales staff interacted with customers, the cleanliness of the floors, the placement of the vehicles. He paused by a sleek black sports car, running his fingers lightly over the hood. It was a beautiful machine, one he had admired for years. "Can I help you?" The voice was sharp, laced with an edge of impatience. Marcus turned to see a man in his mid-40s approaching, his tailored suit and polished shoes screaming authority. The name tag on his chest read Greg Thompson, manager. "Just looking," Marcus replied with a polite smile, his tone calm and measured. Greg's eyes flicked over Marcus's outfit, his expression tightening. "This is high-end dealership," he said, his voice dripping with condescension. "Our vehicles are for serious buyers only. If you're just here to browse, I'd suggest you try somewhere else." Marcus raised an eyebrow, his smile never wavering. "I am a serious buyer," he said evenly. Greg let out a short, dismissive laugh. "Look, I don't have time for this. These cars start at 6 figures. If you can't afford that, you're wasting my time and yours." The words hung in the air, heavy with implication. Marcus felt the weight of Greg's assumptions, the unspoken judgment based on nothing more than the color of his skin and the clothes he wore. He glanced around the showroom, noticing how other employees had stopped to watch the exchange, their expressions a mix of curiosity and discomfort. "I understand," Marcus said, his voice still calm but firm. "But I'm not here to waste anyone's time. I'd like to speak with the staff." Greg's patience snapped. "Enough," he said, his voice rising. "I don't know what you're trying to pull, but you need to leave. Now." Marcus hesitated for a moment, then reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. Without a word, he began recording. Greg's face flushed with anger. "Security!" Greg barked, gesturing toward the door. "Escort this man out." 2 uniformed guards appeared, their presence looming. Marcus didn't resist as they guided him toward the exit, but his eyes never left Greg's. There was a quiet intensity in his gaze, a promise that this wasn't over. As the glass doors closed behind him, Marcus stood on the sidewalk, the recording still running in his hand. He smiled to himself, a small, knowing curve of his lips. Tomorrow, he thought, would be a very different day. The hook was set. The game had just begun. The morning sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the dealership, casting a warm glow over the pristine showroom. Greg Thompson stood near his office, sipping a cup of coffee and reviewing the day's schedule. The incident from the previous day was already fading from his mind, just another trespasser dealt with, another potential disruption avoided. He had no way of knowing that the man he'd so hastily dismissed was about to turn his world upside down. At precisely 9 a.m., the glass doors slid open and Marcus Johnson stepped inside. This time, he was unrecognizable from the man Greg had confronted the day before. Dressed in a tailored navy suit, polished Oxford shoes, and a crisp white shirt, Marcus exuded confidence and authority. His presence was magnetic, drawing the attention of every employee in the room. Greg froze mid-sip, his coffee cup hovering in the air as his eyes locked onto Marcus. For a moment, he didn't recognize him. But then it clicked, the calm demeanor, the piercing gaze, the quiet confidence. It was the same man he'd thrown out yesterday. "You," Greg said, his voice tight with disbelief. "What are you doing here?" Marcus didn't respond immediately. Instead, he walked slowly toward the center of the showroom, his eyes scanning the room as if taking mental notes. The employees exchanged uneasy glances, sensing the tension in the air. "I asked you a question," Greg snapped, setting his coffee cup down with a sharp clink. "You're not welcome here. Leave now, or I'll call security again." Marcus stopped and turned to face Greg, his expression calm but unyielding. "You might want to hold off on that," he said, his voice steady. "I think you'll want to hear what I have to say." Greg's face flushed with anger. "I don't have time for games. If you don't leave right now, I'll have you arrested for trespassing." Marcus reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. With a few taps, he brought up the recording from the day before. He held it up, the screen facing Greg. "Before you do that, maybe you'd like to explain this." Greg's eyes narrowed as he leaned in to see the screen. The video played clearly. Marcus, dressed in his hoodie, being berated and escorted out by security. Greg's voice rang out, sharp and condescending. "These cars start at 6 figures. If you can't afford that, you're wasting my time and yours." The color drained from Greg's face. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. Marcus lowered the phone and slipped it back into his pocket. "My name is Marcus Johnson," he said, his voice carrying across the silent showroom. "As of yesterday, I am the new owner of this dealership." The room erupted in murmurs. Employees exchanged shocked glances, some whispering to each other in disbelief. Greg stared at Marcus, his mouth agape, his mind racing to process the revelation. You can't be serious," Greg stammered, his voice trembling. "I'm very serious," Marcus replied, his tone firm. "And after what I witnessed yesterday, I think it's time we had a conversation about how this business is run." Greg's hands clenched into fists at his sides, but he said nothing. The weight of his actions bore down on him, and for the first time in years, he felt powerless. Marcus turned to the gathered employees, his gaze sweeping across the room. "I'll be holding a staff meeting in 1 hour," he announced. "I expect everyone to be there." With that, he turned and walked toward the office, leaving Greg standing in the middle of the showroom, his world unraveling with every step Marcus took. The hook was set deeper now, and the stakes had never been higher. The dealership's conference room was packed, every seat occupied by employees who shifted uneasily in their chairs. The air was thick with tension, a palpable sense of anticipation hanging over the room. At the front stood Marcus Johnson, his presence commanding attention as he adjusted the projector. Greg Thompson sat in the corner, his face pale, his usual confidence replaced by a nervous silence. Marcus cleared his throat, and the room fell quiet. "Thank you all for being here," he began, his voice calm but firm. "As some of you may have heard, I'm Marcus Johnson, the new owner of this dealership. I wanted to take this opportunity to introduce myself and share my vision for the future of this business." He paused, letting his words sink in. The employees exchanged glances, their curiosity piqued. Marcus continued, "I believe in transparency, so I want to start by addressing something that happened yesterday." He picked up a remote and clicked a button. The projector screen lit up, displaying the recording from his phone. The room watched in stunned silence as the video played. Marcus, dressed in his hoodie, being berated and escorted out by Greg. The manager's words echoed through the room, sharp and unapologetic. "These cars start at 6 figures. If you can't afford that, you're wasting my time and yours." When the video ended, Marcus turned to face the room. "This," he said, gesturing to the screen, "is not the kind of behavior I will tolerate in this dealership. It's unacceptable, and it's not reflective of the values I want this business to stand for." The room was silent, the weight of the moment pressing down on everyone. Greg sank lower in his chair, his face burning with shame. Marcus's gaze swept across the room, his expression serious but not unkind. "I'm not here to point fingers or assign blame. I'm here to make sure this dealership becomes a place where everyone, employees and customers alike, feels respected and valued. That starts with accountability." He turned to Greg, who flinched under the attention. "Greg, I'm suspending you effective immediately, pending an investigation into your conduct. This isn't personal. It's about ensuring that this business operates with integrity." Greg opened his mouth to protest, but no words came out. He simply nodded, his shoulders slumping in defeat. Marcus turned back to the room. Moving forward, I'll be implementing new policies to promote diversity, inclusion, and respect in the workplace. I'll also be holding training sessions to ensure that every member of this team understands and embodies these values. The employees exchanged glances, some nodding in agreement, others still processing the sudden shift in leadership. Marcus's tone softened as he added, I know change can be difficult, but I believe in this team. Together, we can make this dealership a model for the industry. He clicked off the projector and stepped away from the podium. Thank you for your time. I'll be meeting with department heads later today to discuss next steps. For now, let's get back to work. As the employees filed out of the room, Marcus stayed behind, his eyes lingering on the now blank projector screen. He knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but he was ready for the challenge. Greg lingered near the door, his face a mask of regret. For the first time in his career, he realized the cost of his assumptions and the price he might have to pay. The hook was set and the stakes were clear. The revelation had changed everything and there was no turning back. The recording of Marcus Johnson's confrontation with Greg Thompson spread like wildfire. By midday, it had gone viral on social media, sparking outrage and heated debates. News outlets picked up the story, and the dealership found itself at the center of a national conversation about racism, privilege, and workplace discrimination. Marcus sat in his new office, his phone buzzing incessantly with notifications. Reporters were calling for interviews, activists were reaching out to commend him, and customers were flooding the dealership's social media pages with messages of support and, in some cases, criticism. He had expected some backlash, but the scale of the response was overwhelming. Meanwhile, Greg's suspension had sent shockwaves through the staff. Some employees quietly celebrated, relieved that his abrasive management style was being addressed. Others, however, were nervous about the changes Marcus had promised. Change was never easy, and the uncertainty hung heavy in the air. Marcus called a meeting with the department heads later that afternoon. Around the conference table sat a mix of seasoned managers and younger leaders, all watching him with cautious curiosity. I know this has been a difficult day, Marcus began, his tone calm but firm. But it's also an opportunity for us to do better. I've already started drafting new policies to promote diversity and inclusion, and I want your input to make sure we get this right. He handed out copies of the proposed changes, mandatory sensitivity training, a zero-tolerance policy for discrimination, and a new customer service protocol that emphasized respect and equality. The managers flipped through the documents, their expressions a mix of approval and apprehension. This is a lot to take in, said Sarah, the head of sales, but I think it's necessary. What happened with Greg, it's been a long time coming. Marcus nodded. I understand that change can be uncomfortable, but it's essential if we want to move forward. I'm counting on all of you to lead by example and help your teams adapt. As the meeting wrapped up, Marcus pulled Sarah aside. How's the team holding up, he asked. Sarah sighed. It's mixed. Some people are relieved, but others are worried about what this means for their jobs. Greg had a lot of influence here, and not everyone is ready to let that go. I get that, Marcus said, but we can't let fear hold us back. This is about creating a better workplace for everyone. Later that evening, Marcus received a call from Greg. The former manager's voice was strained, his usual confidence replaced by desperation. Marcus, I want to apologize, Greg said haltingly. I was wrong and I'm sorry. I hope you'll consider giving me another chance. Marcus leaned back in his chair, considering his response. I appreciate the apology, Greg, but actions speak louder than words. If you're serious about making amends, you'll need to prove it. There was a long pause before Greg replied. The dealership buzzed with renewed energy, a stark contrast to the tension that had gripped it just weeks before. Marcus Johnson stood at the center of the showroom, watching as employees interacted with customers, their smiles genuine and their demeanors welcoming. The changes he had implemented were beginning to take root, and the atmosphere was transforming. Greg Thompson's suspension had ended, But his return was far from triumphant. Marcus had decided to give him a second chance, albeit under strict conditions. Greg was required to complete sensitivity training and work under a probationary period, his every move scrutinized. It was a humbling experience for the once proud manager, but he was determined to prove himself. Marcus approached Greg, who was helping a customer with a test drive. "How's it going?" Marcus asked, his tone neutral but not unkind. Greg looked up, his expression a mix of gratitude and resolve. "It's going well," he said. "I'm trying to do better." Marcus nodded. "That's all I ask. Keep it up." As Marcus walked away, he felt a sense of cautious optimism. Greg's transformation was still a work in progress, but the effort was there. It was a small victory, but an important one. The dealership's reputation had also begun to shift. The viral video had initially brought negative attention, but Marcus's handling of the situation had turned the tide. News outlets praised his leadership, and customers flocked to the dealership, eager to support a business that stood for equality and respect. Marcus held a town hall meeting with the staff to celebrate their progress. "I'm proud of what we've accomplished so far," he said, addressing the room. "But this is just the beginning. We have a long way to go, and I'm counting on all of you to help us get there." The employees applauded, their enthusiasm genuine. Marcus's vision had inspired them, and they were eager to be part of something bigger than themselves. As the meeting ended, Marcus pulled Sarah aside. "You've been a huge help through all of this," he said. "I couldn't have done it without you." Sarah smiled. "I'm just glad to see this place becoming what it should have been all along." Marcus returned to his office, his mind already racing with plans for the future. The dealership was thriving, but he knew the work was far from over. There were still challenges to face, lessons to learn, and growth to achieve. As he sat at his desk, Marcus glanced at a framed photo on the wall, a picture of his father, who had always dreamed of owning a business like this. Marcus smiled, a sense of fulfillment washing over him. He had not only achieved his father's dream, but had also turned it into a force for good. The hook was clear. The story was far from over, but the foundation had been laid. The dealership was a symbol of change, a testament to the power of accountability and second chances. And Marcus Johnson was just getting started. The stakes were high, but so was the potential. The new beginning was here, and the future was full of promise.